I don't know about you, but I've always had a hard time telling verb tenses apart. Don't get me wrong, I've never had any difficulties correctly conjugating said verbs in English, but somehow the theoretical aspect always went over my head. It's as if these verb tense names always went in one ear but came right out the other. Since I imagine I'm far from the only one who has a hard time memorizing all of this grammatical mumbo-jumbo, today I'll try to explain the past verb tenses in a simple, visual way. Let's start off with the easiest of the four, the simple past. It is used to describe an event taking place either in the recent or distant past and whose duration is irrelevant. This tense is used when talking about when something happened. The structure of the simple past is pretty easy. It is simply the subject plus the verb plus ed at the end of the verb. For example, they walked home after school. In the negative form, you keep the verb infinitive and add did not between the subject and the verb. They did not talk about the pandemic before. For the interrogative form, you simply put did before the subject and the verb infinitive. Did she die because of COVID-19? Some verbs are a little rebellious. They don't use the same rules. For example, to give or to come don't become gived and comed in the simple past. Their first vowel instead turns into an A. So for example, to give turns into gave. To come becomes came. And this applies to all pronouns. So for example, for the verb to come in the simple past would be I came, you came, she came, and so on. The second past verb tense is the past progressive, and it is used to describe an action that was ongoing in the past, but that has now been completed. It is made up of a past form of the verb to be, that is, was or were, depending on the used pronoun, plus a present participle, meaning the verb plus ing. I know this sounds complex, but it's actually pretty simple and intuitive. So for example, she was walking to the nearest park. So in this case, she was indicates that it's taking place in the past, but walking suggests that the action is ongoing. For the negative form, you simply have to add a negation after the verb to be. They were not discussing politics. For the interrogative form, you simply switch the verb and the subject. Were you crying earlier? Now let's progress to a slightly more complex verb tense, the past perfect. It is used to describe an action that took place before a certain point in the past. It takes place in a kind of double past. Its structure is fairly simple. You simply use had plus the past participle of the verb. So for example, she had studied up to page 35. So in the past, she had already completed the action to study up to page 35. You could also say, he had eaten his meal in a few minutes. In the past, he had already finished eating his meal. The past perfect can also express the third conditional, which means looking back on an event that took place in the past and speculating about how things could have turned out differently. So for example, if her computer had not crashed, she would have been able to complete her homework. The action of her computer crashing takes place before the past, if that makes any sense. The final verb tense is the past perfect progressive. At first, it can look strikingly similar to the past perfect, but there is a difference. So when do you use this tense? It is used to describe the process of an action that took place before or up to a certain point in the past. So here it's important to understand that the emphasis is put on the process of the action. Its grammatical structure is had plus been plus the present participle or ing. For example, she had been studying the whole night. In the past perfect, we said she had studied up to page 35. But here, she had been studying the whole night. Here, the emphasis isn't put on the fact that the action is complete, it is put on the process of the action. Second example, he had only been eating for a few minutes before he finished his meal. So now that we've looked at all 4 past verb tenses, let's look at the difference between the past perfect and the present perfect. The present perfect is used to talk about an action that has happened before the present time, but it does not include a specific time. It is also used to describe something such as an experience, a change that has taken over time, accomplishments, and actions that took place at different times. It can also be used to describe an action that started in the past, but is continuing up until the present. The past perfect, on the other hand, is used to describe an action that happened before a certain point in time, and also an action that has been repeated several times at a specific point in the past. It is finally used to express a conditional form like we saw earlier. In a nutshell, the present perfect describes an action that happened in the recent past and could still be ongoing right now, whereas the past perfect describes an action that has happened in the past and continued up to a given point, but is now finished. You had assumed I would have gotten there faster. This kid has grown up since last summer. So this was past verb tenses in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time.